Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate so many incredible people across the state of Mississippi who are really working hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, it won't surprise you to learn that as the publisher of the Sun-Herald and in the career I had leading up to becoming publisher of the Sun-Herald, worked at the Sun-Herald for 27 years. I met a lot of people along the way, had the opportunity to be involved in lots of efforts, certainly after Hurricane Katrina, that is for sure. But, you know, if you look back in the history of Mississippi, when Kirk Fordice was elected the governor of Mississippi, it was a real important event for Republicans in this state. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But I watched Governor Fordice closely, and there's this name that continued to surface during his entire administration. And I'm sure that Andy Taggart and I met somewhere along the way in passing, but it wasn't until our sons went to law school together that I had the opportunity to sit down and visit with Andy Taggart. And first of all, I learned what a super nice guy is, but more importantly, to really have an appreciation for his long, long history in Mississippi. He now actually lives on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, which I find interesting. And Andy, first, I have one more thing I'm going to say, but before I do that, I just want to welcome you to the Ricky Mathews Show. How are you doing?
It's a delight, Ricky. I'm doing great. It's such a pleasure to get a chance to visit with you. And look, I wear as a badge of honor the friendships that I have made as a consequence of my children. So I appreciate you making the point about Drew and Jordan.
Well, yeah, and so do I. And so do I. As you know, my son Jordan. People who are regular listeners know this about Jordan. He's a fish whisperer. He loves to duck hunt and deer hunt. And as it turns out, Andy's son Drew also loves to fish, and he just loves the outdoors. And he's been fishing with us a bunch of times, and I've always joked about when Drew's on the boat, it's going to be an epic trip. We've had some of the best trips we've ever had. He brings his fly rod with us, and I'm telling you, and you know how many times we've fished over the many years. The trips with Drew are always notable. So that's a cool thing to be able to say. But he loves the outdoors, doesn't he?
That's mighty nice of you. Yes, in fact, on one of his social media platforms, his little caption is, "I'd usually rather be outdoors," and that's a fact. In fact, he has it worse than I. I mean, I reared him as a fisherman and a hunter, but he caught the bug way worse than I, and he's a much more accomplished fisherman and hunter than I am.
Yeah, it's cool to watch him. He goes on to work as a lawyer in Texas, becomes a partner in the firm that he's associated with. He's had a good career for himself, hasn't he?
It's been fun to watch. And then middle son Rob works for the United States State Department, and that's all he can tell me. So he's in Frankfurt, Germany.
Woo, man, you just never know about those. What a great experience he's getting, and how that will accrue to something. Who knows where that will take him in his life once he gets that experience.
We're thrilled. We miss being close to them, of course, but we're thrilled for them. They have our two grandsons out there. Drew has our granddaughters in Houston, and it's just been a delight to watch both families grow.
Yeah, it is. It has been really cool. Now, what I was going to say, what I would add to that, when I read your history, I thought a little bit about myself because I've been through so many iterations of my life, working through the Sun-Herald. Never thought I'd leave the Sun-Herald, then going to work for Advanced Condé Nast, first in Mobile and then in New Orleans and then as a regional president. I've been through so many iterations of my life. And then, of course, Hurricane Katrina was a very significant iteration from a community leadership point of view. I was always involved in the community, but it was after Katrina that I really learned just the kind of role the private sector and a volunteer role could play in something like a recovery effort. I led the oil recovery efforts for Governor Riley in Alabama when I went to Alabama. But, you've been through and then I'm doing the show now. So I'm kind of a cat with 9 lives. You're the same way. When I look at your career, you could have checked out a long time ago, but you're still swinging. What keeps you going?
Look, my wife is always pleased when I come home with the same job I left the house with that morning. She used to tease me and say the only thing I've done longer than 5 years is stay married. My record's a little bit better than that now. Look, I've thought a lot about it, Ricky, and I suspect that you have gone down this same road in your own thinking. I think the likelihood of me retiring in the American sense of the word is pretty low. I just can't imagine, as much as I love to hunt and fish, just doing nothing but hunting and fishing. I still get a charge out of my profession. I love working around smart people who are doing cool things, and I have the privilege of getting to do that in our law firm. And there are still some things I want to do. My evil alter ego Democrat liberal friend Jerry Nash and I have recently been asked to do a third edition of our history book. So that's kind of a new and fun project that we're going to be resurfacing next year. And in my law practice, I'm getting the chance to work on matters that are of real interest to me and challenging to me, and that I'm still learning about. So at least as long as the Lord gives me good health, I suspect I'll at least come into the office and drink coffee and talk on the telephone.
I don't blame you. Listen, when I retired back in 2016, John Hairston and a long group of others said, you will not stay retired. Mm-hmm. I said, no, you watch. I will stay retired. It started out immediately, went to Costa Rica fishing, and to make a long story short, I was actually doing pretty good for 4 years. I was enjoying, fishing and
that's good
and spending time with grandkids until I got the call to do this show. And I had forgotten, I've said it many times on the show, but I had forgotten how much I enjoyed connecting with the community. That's, I didn't miss the P&L responsibility and all the change efforts I was involved with, but I did miss connecting with the community. And this, once it started to evolve and I decided to do this, it became the most wonderful gift for me personally, the opportunity to stay connected with people like you and so many others. And from time to time, get involved in an issue that, using sort of the audience and the multimedia footprint of SuperTalk to make a difference. And that's been fun for me. But I still consider myself retired.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it.
I do. When you compare it to being CEO of a major company, believe me, man, it's retired.
I'm sure the stress level is
oh
way
my
different.
Gosh.
But, I'm not trying to be patronizing to you, but you're so well suited to it, even though your whole career was sort of in expressing through the written media. You do such a great job with this, and the varied nature of your guests and topics of conversation, I think, really have caught the imagination of your audience.
Well, I was listening, not to compare myself with Joe Rogan. I'm not doing that at all, but I was listening to Joe Rogan talk recently about why he knows so much about so many different things. And it's through, see, this is not unlike Joe Rogan or other podcasts like him. This radio show is long form. And one of the things that I signed up for was doing a long form. I didn't want to do quick interviews and sound bites. I wanted to be able to have someone like you for a whole show. Okay. When you can do that and delve into someone's past and really understand what makes them motivated and see their contributions and learn from them and listen to them, when you can do what we're doing now, it has a way of sort of accruing in the knowledge base. And my hard drive is filling up with information, and it's fun for me. I love doing that. I loved leading editorial boards. I knew that I would, but I really did. And this is sort of like that. You don't have to learn from someone else what someone thinks. You can actually go to the source and learn from them directly, and it's been a great gift for me. I've really enjoyed that. But you know what? I'll go back. There's a lot I didn't know about you. I didn't know that you went to Mississippi College. I didn't know that you went to law school at Tulane. I really got to know the president of Tulane really well when I was in New Orleans as president of NOLA Media Group, and the role that Tulane is playing in the community in so many different ways. What a great institution Tulane is.
It's a remarkable place. It truly is.
And you did. I did some adjunct professor stuff too as well after I got out of school, and you've done that with Mississippi College. You've not lost your connection back to Mississippi College, and that has iterated in so many different ways over the years. But that's been important to you, hasn't it?
Well, I love MC. I met my bride there, among other things. If we get to January 8th, that will have been 42 years that I will have been married to Karen. And so I'm certainly indebted to the university for that reason. Rob is a graduate of MC. Of our three, he was the one that chose MC. And then I had the privilege of serving on the board there for several years. And we have continued remain in close contact. We have endowed a scholarship in memory of our youngest son at the school, and watch with great interest what is going on there. Have the privilege of getting to follow the careers of students who are the beneficiaries of the scholarship, which has been an unexpected joy in addition. And I will just tell you, every young person who comes to ask me about whether it's too small or, will I miss the SEC experience, I say what a recruiter said to son Rob, who was all bent to go to Mississippi State. And that is, I'm not going to make my decision about where to spend 4 years of college based on 6 Saturdays in the fall every year. So
that's interesting. Listen, when we get back on the other side, we're going to chat with Andy Taggart about what's his law firm down here now. We'll talk about his law experience, but specifically his work as chief of staff for Governor Kirk Fordice in a really important point of, especially as it relates to conservatives in Mississippi, was a seminal event for him and for this state, for that matter. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for all the great feedback we get along the way. I really appreciate it, and it makes me want to continue to put the energy into these shows so we can have these terrific conversations with people like my guest today, Andy Taggart. Hey, one other thing I want to say to you, Andy Taggart. You mentioned an author that you had worked with, Jerry Nash. I had the opportunity to work with him on Haley's book.
Yeah.
And I wrote the foreword to it, and he came over to visit me.
It's on my coffee table right now.
Yeah, he came over to visit me in New Orleans, and man, he is a talented dude.
Oh, he truly is.
Yeah.
As you may be aware, he and I did a gig on the Sunday Night News for WLBT in Jackson for 8 years. It was hard to believe that the run went that long. And people used to say, how can you stand that guy? Y'all disagree about everything. I said, look, he's really a great guy. He's really smart. We're really close personal friends. He's just wrong about everything.
Hey, listen, one of the things, Haley Barber and I are good friends, as you can imagine. And, he has said to me personally, and he said it on this show before, that what's missing in Washington today is that kind of deep respect and friendship. He says too many people don't stay in Washington, so as soon as it's time to go, of course they're getting messages now that they won't be leaving on Thursdays anymore. So that might start to fix some of this. But he said, when you get to know each other, even if you disagree on policy, you still respect each other. And we've lost that. And he recounts the times when he was in the room with Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. And of course, they were famous for battling. But then when they got together and had a drink together, they loved each other. And he got to see that firsthand. That's missing in politics today, though, isn't it, Andy?
It really is. In fact, that's one of the reasons Jerry and I did the gig that we did, is we thought it very important to model for our sons and hopefully for the broader community that you can disagree about really important things. The policy issues that divide our nation are not minor issues. They're big issues. But you can disagree on really important things and still be friends and still respect one another. And even if I do think he's wrong about everything, I'm crazy about Jerry Nash. And that I can't tell you that I know he feels the same way about me, but I think he's fond of me.
I bet he does. Hey, when did you know you wanted to get into law?
That's an interesting question. My friends always thought I would be a lawyer. I did the youth Congress kind of deals when I was coming through high school, and then I was on our debate squad at Mississippi College. So all my friends thought I'd be a lawyer, but my dad didn't want me to be a lawyer. He worked at Chevron his entire life in Pascagoula, and he always had a little bit of a jaundiced view about the regulatory framework within which they had to operate. And, he didn't really see lawyers as contributing to the productivity of the community. But he never told me he didn't want me to be a lawyer. I just knew that he didn't. So I never thought I would. And it wasn't really until I was offered the scholarship that I was blessed with at Tulane that I made the decision that, if somebody else is going to write the check, I think I'm going to give this a go. And after that, it was really quite obvious that I had made the right step for my life.
Yeah, it really worked out well. Did you have an interest for politics all along the way?
Yes. In fact, I first worked in a campaign when I was 10 years old. my across-the-street neighbor was running for county attorney, and his daughters and my brothers and I were all exactly the same age. So we became the street crew, and I was just completely taken by the process. And then I'm a little nerdy about it. I still have very corny Declaration of Independence ideas about the United States of America. I still think it matters that we get to choose who our leaders are, and that we can fire them if we need to. I do believe in American exceptionalism, and that has always really counseled my reason for being involved in public policy issues.
So, what was the steps? Because I don't see this. When I read more about you, I don't see this clearly. That ultimately said, being chief of staff during this, as I described it, a seminal event for Mississippi, Kirk Fordice's election as a Republican governor of Mississippi. What led up to that said, I'm going to leave the law practice and I'm going to contribute to Mississippi in the way that you did? Because that was a big step.
It really was. And I had a number of folks whose opinions I really highly regard telling me they didn't think it was the right step. A few things I would say about that. One is I had become friends of Kirk Fordice because of my law practice. Our law firm represented his business, and he and I had just become personal friends. Also, when I worked at the state GOP, he was in a volunteer leader capacity at the Mississippi Republican Party. And so that added to our layers of friendship. And I knew that he really did believe what he said about the way government ought to operate. So when he decided to make his race, Ricky, in 1991, I think he's the only person in the state of Mississippi that believed he could beat Ray Mabus and be elected governor. I didn't think that he could, but I knew that it needed to be done, and I signed on just in a volunteer capacity very, very early in that campaign to fill whatever role I could, and it never with any notion that I would be going into state government, even if he had been elected, which I didn't think he would. But very shortly after the election, he called me over to Vicksburg and asked me if I would join with him. And of course, it was a huge honor on the one hand, but it was a very significant career decision for me to have to make, and I don't regret it one bit.
I know you don't, because you became such a key player. When I think back about Kirk Fordice, in a lot of respects, he was kind of a man before his time. When you think about the approach that he took, and he was no nonsense. He shot straight. He really understood what his conservative, foundation was, and he operated from that. You compare sort of the approach that he took to some of the current day political scene, and he was actually, again, I describe him as kind of a man before his time, but it's true, isn't it?
It's absolutely true, and I think that's one reason that we had so many challenges in getting legislative support for what he wanted to do. Frankly, the state government and our legislative leadership just weren't there yet. They've evolved to that point since, and we've seen dramatic reform, much of which found its genesis in the Kirk Fordice administration. If not the specific policy issues, at least the mindset that would say, just because we've done it for 100 years doesn't mean we ought to continue to do. In fact, the fact that we've done it for 100 years and here we are might suggest that we need to make changes. Well, the legislative leadership was not there in the 1990s, and I think that the governor didn't have the kind of larger policy victories that we all worked hard for than he did, was because he was a man really ahead of the thinking of the state at the time.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you said it well. I mean, what I would have said is that he was planting seeds. And I often say on the show, and you know this well, you said it many times yourselves, that the wheels of democracy will, tend to turn slowly for a reason. But he was planting seeds and tapping into something that was really at the core of a lot of Mississippians. And while it took the legislature time to move along, finally the legislature did swing conservative, and the rest is kind of history, really, if you look back on it now. But he planted a hell of a lot of seeds. You helped him plant a bunch of seeds.
Well, that's gracious of you to say. I was delighted to be along for the ride, for sure. I think that Haley Barbour certainly gets credit for for providing the bridge that allowed us to get from the Kirk Fordice years to where we are today in terms of reform of state government in the state of Mississippi. But I think that Haley would agree that Kirk Fordice laid the platform that made Haley's successes possible.
Yeah. I call that kind of a transformational leader. You think about a company, if a company buys another company, sometimes what they'll do is install a CEO who is a transformational leader that's got to worry with the merger and acquisition stuff and get the company. Maybe the company needs to downsize some. They got some new strategic directions to take. That person's going to make a lot of tough decisions, going to say a lot of tough things. And then once those things are done, then another leader is going to come in and bridge gaps and bring people together and whatever. I think that's what happened in Mississippi.
That's a very good analogy, and I think it's very accurate. You remember, was it Jack Welch, the guy who cracked all the eggs at GM?
100% Jack Welch, yeah. He was a transformational leader.
Kirk Fordice made his career laying concrete flood control maps on the banks of the Mississippi River. And he said to a man, do this, and he did it. And he said to another man, go there, and he went. Well, of course, that's not how government works. But when Governor Fordice brought that kind of, crack some eggs to make an omelet mentality, it shook state government up significantly. And your analogy rings so true. Haley Barbour, no shrinking violet himself, was just the kind of cajoler and consensus builder and come on, let's get this done kind of a personality to build on Kirk Fordice's lay the concrete mats mentality.
Yeah, I got to see so many times Haley's unique skill to massively disagree with someone and make it very clear we're not going down that road, but somehow end the conversation with that person supporting him.
Yeah, it's an amazing gift, and you're exactly right.
Yeah. Oh, it also helped to have a mind like a steel trap. I told the story. In fact, I tell you, we're at the end of this segment. When we come back on the other side, we'll pick it up from there. But we're visiting with Andy Taggart and just telling some stories. We'll see you after this break.
Good.
Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're thrilled to be joined today by Andy Taggart, who's with Taggart Rines Attorneys here in coastal Mississippi, but a long history in politics here in the state. Obviously worked as chief of staff for Governor Kirk Fordice. We were talking about Kirk Fordice as sort of a transformational leader, delivered a lot of tough messages for our state. He didn't mind shaking it up. He also had a mind like a steel trap, didn't he, Andy?
Very, very smart guy and very widely read. I admired lots of things about him, but that was very high on the list.
Well, what you find usually in people who are successful politically, they're pretty sharp too. They are good at building great relationships. Certainly that was a characteristic that Governor Barbour had. I told a story about being in an editorial board meeting in the foreword I wrote to his book, being in an editorial board meeting with him, and we were talking about all the big issues in the state regarding Hurricane Katrina. Then we got into a specific grant in Waveland, and he remembered every aspect of it, line by line. It was extremely impressive to watch him in business. So yeah, we were lucky to have all of them. But when you were a gatekeeper. When you think about a chief of staff, chief staffs are typically gatekeepers, but sometimes like someone like Haley was kind of the gatekeeper for Haley. Mm-hmm. But you were really a gatekeeper, which actually then created more name recognition for Andy Taggart. That's what I remember about your tenure working for Governor Fordice. But it's true. You were kind of you opened doors and shut doors for a lot of people, didn't you?
Well, the great thing about working for Kirk Fordice was he appreciated the legit role of a chief of staff. He didn't second guess everything that I did. He didn't even need to know everything that I did because he knew that I was downloading his thought processes, his objectives. He was the consummate CEO in the sense that he said, okay, the objective is take that hill. And then he goes on to think about what the next objective ought to be. Instead of telling you, I want you to take the path on the right and then, cut down that tree on the way and get 3 people to help you move that brush. You just take the hill. That's the kind of leadership I think a CEO ought to give. And as a very young chief of staff, it allowed me to, frankly, to learn what I was good at and what I wasn't so good at.
And man, did you develop some relationships, man? You could not have, at that stage of your career, you couldn't have fallen in. I say fallen in because you didn't actually fall in. You worked hard by developing a relationship with Kirk Fordice, by representing him legally, et cetera. So falling in is a little bit too short shrifting on what you actually did. But to have that position when you did, wow. I mean, what it opened up for you in terms of opportunity, it was pretty tremendous, wasn't it?
Well, I had the privilege of getting to travel the entire state very frequently, which I still value as one of the highest things, one of the most highly valued things I got to enjoy during my career. It's interesting. It's partly to blame or to credit for my having moved back to the coast. I grew up in Moss Point and thought that once I moved to the Jackson area, we reared our boys in Madison, that the likelihood of me ever coming back home was pretty low until I went to work for Governor Fordice. And every couple of weeks, I'd fly on the state plane down to some function on the coast or some work responsibility and fly over the marsh. And I just developed this yearning. That was now 30 plus years ago. I got to get back to the marsh. And so I was finally able to do that a few years ago. The other thing that I would say about the privilege that I had of serving is that I got to interact with people who in their own lives were at the CEO level when I was, of course, nowhere close to that at that stage of my career. And I learned so much, and I had the privilege of getting to meet so many talented people that made Mississippi work on a day-to-day basis. I think that's one of the things I value the most highly.
Yeah, listen, I say the same thing, man. And some of those people are the same people that influenced me. But I think of people like George Schlogel and Jerry St. Pei and a growing number of others that I'm sure influence you just as they influence me. And it changes you. Here's the thing. In my conversation with Michael Watson, who's been to all 82 counties of Mississippi as Secretary of State, when you go there and you meet the people and talk to the people, it forever changes your perception about that part of the state.
That's right.
In other words, every time you do that, you're building another layer of understanding and appreciation and a perspective that can help you be a better leader. You're meeting people who are going to have some way, they're going to touch you in some way that's going to change you as a person. And you've become sort of the sum total of all those experiences. And I'm sure even today, when you look back on it, you think, gosh, had I not had that perspective or met that person or seen that situation or been involved in that, I wouldn't know how to respond in this moment. I mean, the sum total of those experiences have given you some tremendous wisdom, hasn't it?
Well, at least a tremendous volume of ideas. I don't know whether I've turned it into wisdom or not, but you make such an important point. Even though Mississippians all across the state are friendly people sort of by nature, we're also quite provincial. I'm from the coast. I'm from the Delta. I'm from Jackson. I'm from, in North Mississippi. And by and large, live our entire lives within the provincial arena that we've sort of created for ourselves. And having the privilege of getting to interact in all of those different provinces of our state and see the values of each and areas of improvement that each ought to subject itself to just gave me so many ideas, both in the policy arena and in the business arena. And then even more important than that, I still have friends that I met 30 and 40 years ago as a consequence of working for the state GOP or working for Governor Fordice that I hold in very high esteem, have strong personal relationships with, and in some instances, business relationships with.
Yeah. It creates, and the same experience, the same thing happened to me, the more I gained experience and having a place up in the Mississippi Delta, which I love the Mississippi Delta. But I understand about the Mississippi Delta, as my friend Lee Abraham says, that it never got out of the Depression. It's locked into the farming economy, and we have to figure that out because at the end of the day, whether we're talking about healthcare, or education, or whatever it might be, Mississippi, the averages of Mississippi are never going to be where they need to be if we can't pull areas like the Mississippi Delta to a place where it should be. And the other thing is that 51% of Mississippians, over 51% of Mississippians live in rural areas of our state. And so you start to look at that and you realize that this thriving economic engine that is coastal Mississippi and the Golden Triangle link and the multi-billions of dollars worth of investment that's happening there in the northeast portion of Mississippi and the other economic engines, when you add it all together, it works together. But you can't gain that knowledge and not say, boy, we still have some real challenges to solve. And does that haunt you the way it does me? I wish we could get our arms around it better.
I go from being charged up and wanting to sort of re-engage in the public policy arena on the one hand to I've kind of done my tour and I want to focus more on my family and my fly rod. I hope that I won't check out. I don't think my personality will allow me to check out altogether. But there is just so much that needs to be done that it can sometimes lead to almost a sense of despair that they're just too big of a hill to climb. And I sometimes have to talk myself out of that.
I get it. I totally get it, man. It can be overwhelming. But when you're working on a project with Jerry Nash, and maybe there's a way for this growing knowledge to filter into the updated book in some ways to say, gosh, we're making look on the economic development side. We've really, when you look at the macros and the micros and the macros of the work that Tate Reeves is doing today, we're making great progress, and we've had some soft moments along the way, and certainly Haley Barbour helped. But man, you look at now in the second administration for Reeves, he's staking his future. He's staking his legacy on his economic development message.
It's been astounding to watch. You kind of think, okay, well, all right, he's really fired the big shot there, and then he follows it up with another one. It's just been astounding to watch. But it's so critically important for a state like ours. If our economic development improvement is only incremental, we'll just always be 49th or 50th. Incrementally, perhaps by slightly lesser degrees. It has to be orders of magnitude.
Yes.
Like the Amazon deal, like the other huge deals that we've seen announced just in the course of the last couple of years, and it's happening. So there is reason for great optimism in our state.
Well, the ancillary effect of that will be the reverberating effect of the economic development. It plays out in so many different ways. I just give you an example. Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, I often say here on the show that over 50% of their students now are involved in non-traditional education. So we're more work focused on getting the kind of workforce training that we need to have. We need to be able to roll this out across the state. We need every community college in Mississippi to buy in. We're seeing Southern Miss begin to think in this respect. When you have success like the data center in Madison, hey, we're at the end of the segment. When we get back on the other side, we'll continue the conversation. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with my friend Andy Taggart. And when we went to break, we were just talking about the reverberating impact of economic development, how it forces. You think about the data center in Madison County and this billions of dollars and the kind of workforce that is required. When you raise the bar, it pushes everybody, the business community, the education community, everyone to focus. And that ends up lifting the tide of the entire state of Mississippi. And if we continue to do this over and over, like Joe Max Higgins said on my show not long ago, he said, we're not doing billion-dollar deals anymore. Used to billion-dollar deals, that was notable. We're doing multi-billion-dollar deals now. Do you think really Mississippi would have ever spoken those terms?
No, truly, I would not have believed it until the Amazon announcement, for example, was made in Madison County, which I think is $10 billion, and the governor said that's $10 billion to start. You could not have gotten me to believe that a project of that size would be landed. It's beyond imagination.
So, the governor sees that we've got issues with healthcare, we've got issues with diversifying the economic areas of regions like the Mississippi. He sees all those things, but he says, look, I can be moderately successful working across all those dimensions, or I can hit this one, the economic development, getting people better jobs, higher paying jobs, forcing changes in the education system as a result of it. I can put all my energy into this, and and I got a short period of time to do it, incidentally, but I can start the process to raise the bar. And if I'm successful, it's going to help Mississippi. That's what he decided to do. And people can write whatever they want to write about Tate Reeves, but man, this one that will be his legacy.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable thing, because most politicians by nature don't make that decision. They want their fingers in everything. They want to make everybody happy. They want to say yes to as many people as possible. And Governor Reeves, he may not be the most likable fellow that's ever occupied the governor's mansion, but you're exactly right. He set his poll star, and he has kept his eye on it from the very beginning, and the proof's in the pudding.
Hey, in fact, I wrote a little bit about him that maybe wasn't so favorable when he first started to run for governor. But now you look back, and maybe those qualities are the things that actually helped him, because sometimes you got to be a bit of a bulldog to get something done. And he also has a mind like a steel trap, and he knows who's on his team and who's not on his team. And again, when you got a short period of time, Andy, you don't have a lot of time to beat around the bush. You know what I'm saying? So, it all may have worked. In the end, it worked. It did. I mean, the proof again is in the pudding. It worked really well for him. Yeah, it is interesting. It would be interesting to watch you. It'd be interesting to watch. You go back and whether it's whether it's government appointees, whether it's learning about the prison system, whether you name it, all these things you've been involved in, you can't build that storehouse of knowledge and not use it in some way. And what's at the core of that is a guy who wants to give back to the community, that there's something in your DNA that wants to give back to the community, and you're just burdened with that now. Well,
it's hard for me to react to that. I love the state of Mississippi. My mom and dad moved us here when Chevron opened in 1963, and I was a little bitty boy, and it never has occurred to me to live anywhere else, notwithstanding the very significant magnitude of the issues that we face in our state. We reared our boys to be independent and to make their own decisions, and they have staked their flags elsewhere. Obviously, I'd love for them to be closer. I'd love for them to have stayed in the state, but they made the decisions that were best for them and for their families. For me and my bride, unless the Lord intervenes in some very dramatic way, we'll be in Ocean Springs, Mississippi for the rest of our lives, trying the best that we can to be good community members.
Well, I know you will. I can think of so many different shows. I want to do a show where we focus a little bit about your son who passed away and what you've learned as a result of that, and how you've given back in significant ways that we don't even have time to even begin to think about now. I want to talk about the current political situation and how Mississippi, how Mississippi might benefit from the current political situation. What are we learning about Americans in this moment? We're about to witness a massive change in Washington. How will that affect Mississippi? There's so many things that you and I can talk about. So I look forward to having you back sooner than later.
It would be my complete honor, and we look forward to the chance to get to see you and Ann socially as well, and so grateful for your friendship and for what you contribute to making the whole coastal area a better place to live, and the impact you've had over the entire Southeast region during the course of your career. Thank you.
It's been fun, and I look at this as just a small way to give back. But maybe now that the show's rolling out to other markets, maybe it's a way to to maybe broaden that influence in a way and educate people. And, the point, coming back to Democrats and Republicans, we need to get along. And, more times than not, bipartisan legislation makes it through the state of Mississippi. Mississippi is not really this polarized place. We are actually working together on a lot of fronts to do things better. And I know you know that well, too. And that's another thing that you and I can talk about the next time we're together.
Well,
but until then, Andy Taggart, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for the privilege.
This has been Andy Taggart. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I surely did. Listen, have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.